Hello, if you are watching this screencast, it means that you want to learn a little bit more about pathos, which is one of the three appeals that we've learned about so far this year, and also one of the three appeals we're trying to use in our argument papers. Here we go. So what is pathos? Well, it's emotions, plain and simple. It's an appeal to the audience's emotion, and it's honestly the best way to connect to an audience both personally and in a concrete, detailed manner. It also can save an otherwise boring or mundane argument. So if you feel like your argument needs a little bit of zip, then pathos, an emotional appeal, is probably the best way to make it a little better. Feelings, right? We all have them. Everyone in your audience is going to, in some way, have a feeling, so it's best to find some way to appeal to those feelings. Well, pathos can appeal to positive feelings, right? Happiness, sympathy, humor, the good kind of humor, patriotism, and there's a negative side to patriotism, which we'll get to, but more like that prideful patriotism, the patriotism that makes you feel part of a group or part of a common effort, and motivation. Pathos can also appeal to negative feelings, anger, bitterness, fear, the jingoistic kind of patriotism that actually makes you feel distrustful of outsiders, as well as pity. This is not a judgment call here, whether you should or should not appeal to positive or negative emotions. The only point that this is making is that pathos actually is simply a appeal to feelings of all kinds. Okay, so any emotion that is brought into play when the audience is listening is the result of pathos. Okay, this is not necessarily a bad or good use of pathos. You can appeal to anger in a good way, or you can appeal to sympathy in a bad way, but pathos is an appeal to feelings. Okay, so how can I do it well? Well, you can tell a story or an anecdote. That's the easiest way to make a personal connection to your audience. You can use humor, either by making jokes intentionally or kind of like with Noor Ali Yusuf with the perspective of an Arab piece we read, talking in a humorous or sarcastic tone. You can write with imagery, try to paint a picture in your audience's heads using the five senses. Okay, really get them to see what you're talking about, or feel, or even taste, or hear what you're talking about. Directly quote another person who is affected by the issue you are addressing. Your papers are about the American dream, so if you do an interview with a family member who has immigrated to the United States, that could very easily lead to an emotional appeal to your audience. This is what happens a lot in journalism. And then consider using pictures with your text, literal pictures, not writing imagery, but actually using pictures, because, as it's often said, pictures are worth 1,000 words. Okay, so here's an example from Senator Marco Rubio. I suggest right now that you actually pause this video and read it, and try to pick out the different examples of pathos here, and then we'll talk about it after you come back. Okay, so you have paused, you have read Marco Rubio's speech from last year's Republican National Convention. This is a very vivid use of pathos, telling a story of his grandfather growing up in Cuba. I like the detail here about the Padron cigars, talking about politics and baseball, and the verb puffed really creates an image inside my head, and this is just a very clear example of pathos. Senator Marco Rubio, whether you agree with his politics or not, clearly trying to make a personal connection with his audience. So pathos can be misused. How so? Well, you can just simply overuse appeals to emotion. If you are racking up your audience's sympathy level or pity level or anger level every single paragraph, then eventually they're going to get tired of it. You can also use scare tactics to dismiss your opponents. Actually try to make your audience scared if, say, the opposition wins, or if the opposition is victorious, then everything's going to go to hell in a handbasket. That's an example of a misuse of pathos. Just simple melodramatic language, or being overly graphic when describing bad situations. This is very common in the abortion debate. And whether you agree or disagree with abortion or the legality of abortion, oftentimes abortion opponents will use extremely graphic language when describing what happens in an abortion, and a lot of times this puts audiences off. The slippery slope fallacy, which you'll learn more about in the logical fallacy lecture online, but this is basically another scare tactic, saying that if one thing happens, then everything else is going to go wrong, and so we shouldn't do this first thing because we'll go down a slippery slope. Okay, so sorry to go forward fast. So this is kind of how you can misuse pathos. Now the next slide. Okay, so how does this affect your paper? So I think pathos, again, is the best and easiest way to make a kind of mundane or boring argument a little bit better. So see where you can strategically use pathos throughout your paper. This is also a chance to tell a personal story if you have one. So again, I keep going back to this idea of being an immigrant, but if your family has a very rich immigrant history, or any other kind of story that you think relates to the American dream, whether it be starting a small business, are you finding marriage equality with gay rights, then you can use that personal story to great effect. Then I would also caution you, be careful about overusing pathos. If you have an emotional appeal in every paragraph, then it's probably too much. Okay, so here are the key takeaways. Pathos is an appeal to emotion. Makes arguments more interesting generally, and it's an easy way for the speaker or writer to connect personally with the audience. Pathos can also be easily overused. This can lead to melodrama. It can lead to the audience resenting you if you play to their emotions too much. So, pathos, as Nicolas Cage would say, use it wisely.